All right, thanks for stopping by another edition of Jacques Talk. Jacques Doucet along with Wilson Alexander from the Baton Rouge Advocate. Wilson, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Jacques. It's an honor.
Yeah, good to see you, man. This guy's got a great head of hair, right? The older I get, I got to fluff it. You know, you're never going to go bald, I don't think.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, there's some baldness in the family. What I say is I don't care what color it is as long as it's there.
Yeah.
I won't mind.
How old are you?
27.
27. So you just got a big award, right?
Yeah, I was honored to receive the Edward Aschoff Rising Star Award from the Football Writers Association of America. Edward Aschoff, people who cover or who watch college football might be familiar with him. He's an ESPN reporter who suddenly died when he was 34, and so they give it to somebody under 34. And they named me this year, which I guess there wasn't a great pool of candidates. I don't know. It was really it's left me still kind of speechless about the whole thing. I'm just honored to be sort of viewed that way by my colleagues, and has been really nice to get that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Well deserved. Coach Kelly's had some fun with you at the press conferences talking about it. Said that you didn't have to mow your grass, right? Somebody else was going to do that for you.
Yeah, even though I don't have a lawn to be mowed.
Well, all right, so Tiger Stadium here, clearly behind us. We've got a few practices in the books right now. Comparing this team to a year ago as far as how it feels, how it looks, it just feels a lot smoother, more professionally run, more productivity, as opposed to who's playing offensive line, who's our quarterback. Those questions are kind of gone for the most part.
Absolutely. When you look at where this team is right now compared to the same point a year ago at the start of preseason practice, it's starting at a much further point ahead on any sort of timeline in terms of progress and development than it was at the same point a year ago. Like you said, you know who your quarterback is, you know who the starting offensive line is. At this time a year ago, they're cross-training everybody, just trying to figure out something that works. Garrett Dellinger's playing center, all the way up until the first game, and there's just so much more stability in place and continuity that gives this team a chance to start maybe a lot crisper coming out of the gates, a more clean, I think, team that we'll see in the opener against Florida State than we did last year. Does that mean they'll accomplish the same things, even 10 wins, be as good as they were a year ago? No, they still have to go out and continue to improve, but they're starting at a much better point than they were at this time a year ago. No
question about that, and I was a little surprised. Wasn't surprised that we saw a fight, but the fourth day of practice, I mean, typically that's mid-August, everyone's getting tired and worn down. At least that's what you kind of hear, but we are dealing with record high temperatures, and I don't want to bore people by talking about the weather, but Jay Grimes tells me, look, we're 8 or 9 degrees hotter than we should be, and just imagine, just standing there is brutal. Just imagine, having a helmet on, running around and trying to, play football. It's
extremely hot. We asked Savion Jones about this yesterday, who's born and raised in Louisiana, knows these temperatures as well as anybody, has gone through fall camps throughout high school, and he said, man, it's different. Like, it's just, this year is a lot more severe than they're used to practicing in, and that wears on you, obviously. This was, according to Mason Taylor, the second fight of preseason camp in 4 days, so that's obviously something Brian Kelly wants to get snuffed out. They don't want this to continue to be an issue because they're not the characteristics that he wants in his team, but like you said, these things do happen in football, especially with this kind of heat. So it's not something that needs to be, I think, overreacted to at this point. Yeah, it goes on across America. NFL training camps, guys always lose their cool at some point. It was a very animated melee. No one was swinging helmets or anything, but a few guys were sent to the locker room. And I think what Coach Kelly was most upset about was that it just went on too long. He really laid into an assistant in terms of, why didn't you break that up quicker? He absolutely did. That was one of the main points that he was making, was that the coaching staff, the assistants, the strength staff, everybody who's watching practice needed to get in there a lot sooner to prevent this from going on as long as it did. Especially because if the fight continues, you risk the greater chance of somebody getting injured, or in a very silly way that's just not necessary. And so, yeah, he wanted that broken up. And from the players, a fight here and there, it's not like we said, a big deal, but he doesn't want that to be a characteristic of a team that loses its cool in the fourth quarter, or when things get too fiery and too testy when their team isn't able to control its emotions. That's something that he really prioritizes. Yeah, and one of the silliest things that guys do is throw a punch at somebody's helmet, right? They lose their cool. Oh, this is going to feel good to unload this anger on somebody. You punch your helmet, break your hand.
miss a few games, that's not what we want to see.
No, absolutely not, and that's why you want to avoid this. I think people get sort of, maybe football players sometimes forget that they actually are wearing a helmet in the heat of the moment, and you see guys kind of lead with their helmets and sometimes trying to get rid of that. And so you don't want to swing at a helmet, but I think sometimes you forget that they're there in that kind of a situation.
Let's talk about the quarterback spot. So it is clear that Jayden Daniels is the starter of this team. They took him to SEC Football Media Days, put their guy out in front. He was voted the team MVP last year. He accounted for 28 touchdowns. Now, Coach Kelly has said, look, we need more than 17 touchdowns through the air in 14 games. That was last year. He ran for 11. He looks like he is the leader, but I got to tell you, they're letting us watch practice. Garrett Nussmeier is firing that football into some tight windows. He's throwing the ball deep, and I'm not here to not trying to create anything, but this dynamic is not going anywhere in terms of, look, Jaden's our starter, but the Nuss bus is in the garage, and I don't know if it's going to be cranked up or not, but we'll see.
It's the arm talent has just become more and more obvious with the development that's come with it, because we always knew that Garrett Nussmeier had a cannon. It was a matter of controlling that and using it at the right times and making good decisions, and it seems like he's really doing that. He got picked off in practice yesterday, but it wasn't really like a situation where he was making a bad decision. It was trying to give his receiver a chance, and Andre Sam came down with the ball, and that's stuff that happens in preseason. By and large, it's been some gorgeous deep balls, fitting throws into really tight windows, and being aggressive, pushing the ball downfield. And I think if LSU now gets into a point where maybe Jayden Daniels, sprains his ankle, he had that a couple times last year. If that were to happen again, you feel a lot better about where Garrett Nussmeier is developmentally, having to maybe come in at that point. And it'll be fascinating to maybe, get a chance to ask Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock later this week what they see for Garrett Nussmeier this season. Because like you said, Jayden is the starter. He's going to play a lot, but does Garrett have some kind of increased role in any capacity? We just don't know yet.
Yeah, and I think you got to give the coaching staff credit for how they've improved Garrett, because you remember he came in that Southern game last year just trying to do too much, and he had that brutal underhanded pick six that Southern ran back 90 yards or whatever, and then by the end of the year playing at a pretty high level against Georgia in the SEC Championship and then in the Citrus Bowl against Purdue. And look, let's talk up Jayden Daniels. There's probably nothing more maddening to a defensive coordinator when you have a play diagnosed and Jayden Daniels can scramble for 30, 35 yards. I mean, he is probably the most electric runner I've ever seen play quarterback at LSU.
He is so dynamic with the ball in his hands. I mean, we saw it time and time again last year. Don't have to, I guess, necessarily rehash all of those instances, but that's not a part of his game that's gone away by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, like you said, continuing to improve those other parts as a passer. And we've seen signs of progress here this camp. Not necessarily throwing the ball downfield quite like Garrett has. I mean, they're still kind of who they are as quarterbacks to a degree, but I think he's doing a pretty good job of taking the right sort of throws when they're there and taking that chance downfield when it presents itself. He's certainly got the arm talent. I mean, you could see it back looking at his tape from Arizona State as a freshman. It's just a matter of sort of using it at the right moments and not being too afraid to let it rip, and we'll continue to see as he develops over the rest of the preseason.
And Wilson, the guys he's throwing the football to, Malik Neighbors obviously last year over 1,000 yards, and the way he ended the year in that bowl game against Purdue, I think he even threw a couple passes, as well. He did everything in that game. Brian Thomas and Chris Hilton Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., two guys that we covered here locally at Walker and Zachary High School. Sentimental picks on my part to be breakout players this year. Brian Thomas has had 2 solid years, but I think as a junior, his NFL year, so to speak, can take that next step. And Chris Hilton, who we saw catch that final play against Texas in the Texas Bowl against Kansas State, I'd like to see him do big things also.
Brian Thomas has now missed 2 days of practice, essentially missed. He's out there but not really participating. Clearly he's dealing with something. It doesn't seem to be too serious at this point or anything. But, in his place, Chris has gotten a lot of first-team run as a guy who came in the same class as Brian and Malik, actually more highly rated as a recruit than the two of them when they came in. But he hasn't done it yet in his career because he's been injured most of the time. And but you see that he's got that speed, that athleticism. He went up for a couple of really nice grabs yesterday during some 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 work, just showing the hops that he has. The athleticism there, he's just got to go out and show that he's able to put it all together in a game, and he's certainly going to have a chance to be a part of that rotation this year. And then Brian is, kind of he back-to-back seasons with almost an identical stat line of around 360 yards receiving. He's upped his touchdowns though. He's got that height that you really like, the length that can make him really a dynamic receiver. And we just got to go see him put it all together out there again. Like we're saying, it's kind of that, like you're saying, money year for these guys where what are you going to do now in year 3? You're going to be able to take that next step. You got to go see it.
Yeah, and Kyron Lacy, is there a sweet spot for him in there? You know, last year coming from the Cajuns in Lafayette, you know, obviously playing up a lot of much higher level. Texas A&M game, he had a couple drops, maybe struggled with his confidence, but in the spring game made some huge plays, and you'd like to see him, you know, continue to build his confidence and have an impact this year.
He can certainly be part of that maybe top 4 guys, top 3 guys even. I mean, he's getting a lot of first team reps right now. We saw it back in the spring. We're seeing it again here, that he is somebody who looks poised to really assert himself as a starter and take that next step after, like you said, struggling last year with some drops, maybe being just a little bit rigid in some of his route running. He looks really improved in those kinds of areas. Haven't seen him really drop a ball yet here during camp. Pretty reliable hands, and so if he's made that next step, then that gives you, like you're talking about, a group here with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Kyron and Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, the Alabama transfer, who just looks so shifty, and of course these freshmen who are kind of chomping at the bit to try to push them. You have a really, really talented receiver room.
And then you have Mason Taylor, an extension of that from the tight end position. He came and did interviews with us yesterday. There's these drops of things falling. It's rain, folks. It's raining in Louisiana.
It feels great.
You know, it's either bone dry here or we're in the middle of a monsoon. But he did interviews with us. Man, he looked bulked up. He bulked up. He told us he'd gained 10 pounds, but man, you can see it in his neck and his shoulders and everything. He's been hitting the weights.
He did say he wants to change his body composition a little bit in terms of some of that 10 pounds is that he, of course, had shoulder surgery over the off season, and he said that he needs to trim out a little bit of fat, add a little bit of muscle, but you can tell that there is that bulk there that has shown up. He just wants to kind of change the composition of it. But with that, he's already got so fluid as a pass catcher. We saw that as a freshman, even though like early on he had his struggles a little bit here and there. By the end of the year, he was a productive, reliable player. Brian Kelly even mentioned him as a guy who could be a possible All-American kind of player this year. Brian Kelly's always been high on him, and especially if he continues to develop as a blocker, become that kind of well-rounded tight end, then you've got somebody there on the offense who you feel really, really good about. You already did, but you would just continue to do that, feel that way.
This guy's good, huh? This guy's really good. Standing here in the rain too. I promise it starts raining hard. We'll hit the we'll get out of it. But and then the running back spot, they've got so many. Like last year, it was running back by committee. Noah Cain, kind of your touchdown guy around the goal line. He scored 10 touchdowns. John Emery began to show what he can do, and Josh Williams. And now you throw Trey Bradford back in the mix, who I asked about today. It just seems like he's got more lives than a cat, right? I mean, he started here, he left, he went to Oklahoma, he came back, he was off the team again, and now he's back again. So him, and then along with Caleb Jackson, who Coach said is strong, physical, but raw, and then Trey Holly. I think I've named like 4 or 5 of the 15. They've got on the roster. But how many running back can you play, really? You know, a guy gets one carry and then he's gone for 15 minutes and he comes back. I mean, where's the line between, okay, getting in a groove and then trying to play too many guys? We'll see.
Yeah, they're going to have to kind of figure that out as they go through the preseason here. That's something to, again, ask Mike Denbrock when we talk to him later this week about that very thing. We sort of broached the subject with him in the spring, but there just wasn't enough that you had seen at that point to have a really good answer for it. But now you added Logan Diggs since then. Like you said, Trey Bradford, you've got even more guys. And Brian Kelly said today, the thing that I think is going to maybe sort of keep in the back of your mind as we go through this competition is that he thinks experience kind of rises to the top and usually takes over in the end. That's his hunch here and his suspicion based on all of his years of experience. And that leads you to believe that your top probably 4 guys will be Logan Diggs, Josh Williams, Noah Cain, John Emery in some sort of order. They don't want to have to rely on those freshmen too early. Want to let them develop and bring them along. Like you said, Caleb's raw. Trey is to a degree as well, even though he had spring practice. And so they want to be able to rely more on those older guys, bring the younger ones along. In a matter of who's RB1, we'll see, but it's really, like you said, going to be a committee again. And so it's maybe not too big of a deal who takes that first snap against Florida State, because even into the season, it'll probably continue to shake out.
I get asked by fans sometimes, when do you think Brian Kelly's going to finally, with John Emery, because he didn't recruit him, he was from the Ed Ogeron regime with the talent, and at what point do you say, okay, look, you're in your 5th year, can we be a little less high maintenance? But he does do things that the others can't do. He does have that talent, and he's not a bad guy or anything. He's just had some some struggles just getting everything lined up the way he'd like it.
Yeah, academically, obviously there's been those issues that are documented, but Brian Kelly said that there were certain academic requirements that John had to meet. Clearly he has met what the team asked of him, and now he's back out here. And like you said, he brings an explosive element that you don't get from everybody on the team. Armani Goodwin, I think, it has an explosive bit when he's healthy, which has been tough for him during his career. John, you saw it in two plays in particular for me. That Auburn touchdown when he shook off the defender in the backfield, that showed a lot of power and explosiveness. And then, of course, the Alabama touchdown, taking that reception out of the sort of the into the flat, making that cut along the sideline. Like, that's the reason that he was a 5-star coming out of high school. It's just a matter of, he had the drops earlier in his career, and there's always been sort of these little things. Can he finally sort of put it all together in a season? Would he still be like we were talking about with the running backs, would he be RB1 rushing for over 1,000 yards? No, probably not. But he could be a really productive player in this rotation. Yeah.
And Armani Goodwin, like you said, I think he put the Mississippi State game on ice last year when he broke that one into the clear, had the long touchdown run. I'm not going to keep you all day and break down every position group, but we know offensive line, we know we've got Will Campbell on one end, we've got Emory Jones on another. Charles Turner, they've always tried to, I don't want to say get rid of Charles Turner, but they've always tried to kind of bump him out of there, and he's kind of, he stuck his ground. And talking to some assistants earlier in his career, he's a bit of a knucklehead, wasn't always the most mature, but I think they're proud of him that he's stuck in there. They started Dellinger at center last year. In the first drive of the game, the bad snap cost them perhaps a touchdown. And so Turner's still there. Yeah. and they've added some other guys. And so that looks a lot. I think Brad Davis is perhaps sleeping 3 hours a night now instead of 1, like he was last summer.
Yeah, Brad still probably isn't going to sleep all that much. But you do feel much better about where Charles is, having already, because there was a questions even before he was starting against Mississippi State last year and about to go into an SEC schedule as the starter. Is the size going to be a problem? He's listed right at 300 pounds. He's obviously, always as we talked about, a little bit undersized, but they like what he's able to do from a communication standpoint, getting everybody lined up, making all the calls and the checks. The snaps have been reliable. And so even though he's maybe a little bit undersized, it hasn't really been like a huge issue for him going through last season. So even though he missed the spring, he comes back and he's been, the first team center. We'll see if Marlon Martinez is able to maybe continue to push him as we go through the rest of camp. But you feel pretty good about Charles Turner as your center, I think, at this point, because of everything that he brings to the position in terms of, the center's got to do quite a lot, has a lot of responsibility on them, and he's been able to handle that so far as a starter.
Let's talk about some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, it starts with Mason Smith. So he's on a revenge tour. Hurt, obviously, first drive of the game last year against Florida State. Really, there's two ways you can handle an injury, right? You can pout, you can go sit in the corner and be upset and mad at the world, or you can do what Mason did, like was involved in all the team activities. He goes to the bowl game, he speaks at the pep rally, he's helping guys warm up before the Purdue game. He really handled this as well as he could, and now it looks like he kind of, not blaming him for the fight, but that kind of where it's stimulated when you get your butt kicked up front. Yeah. He was breaking into the backfield a lot, you get frustrated. Yeah. And that's he's been dominating a bit at practice.
He has. It was particularly evident, yesterday, because you looked at the offensive line was doing a combo block drill where it's basically 2 against 1, and even in some of those reps, Mason Smith is blowing past people. He is out there again today during 11-on-11 yesterday. The first 2 plays of 11-on-11 yesterday, Mason Smith is in the backfield both times, forcing Jaden Daniels to move off of his spot, and that is somebody who is going to be such a difference for this team if he's able to, and by all signs he is headed in this direction, return to his pre-injury form, because now you've got an inside pass rusher who LSU just didn't quite have last season. Mekhi Wingo stepped up admirably and played so much football for them and did a great job, but he wasn't the pass rusher that Mason Smith is. Now you have that coming inside. You can still bring Harold Perkins and Ovie Gofu and some of these guys off the edges and collapse the pocket just all the way around, prevent some double team situations on Harold because you've got to account for Mason inside. It just gives LSU so many different options to have him right there in the middle of the field, and it looks like he is primed for the breakout that he was probably going to have last season now that he's back from the injury.
Gofu, that's how we say that, right?
As far as I know. That's what I've been saying until he corrects us.
Until we talk to him and find out. And Harold Perkins, he's kind of like a basketball player who came in last year and made 3-pointers and pumped up the crowd, and he did one thing and he did it well. Coach Kelly said, look, Matt House, the defensive coordinator, kind of just drew up stuff in the sand. Yeah. Now, this year, it's like, okay, we're going to ask you to be a true linebacker. We need you to fill gaps and tackle the running game. We need to drop back in pass coverage. Last year it was kind of like, hey, go chase that guy. Go run down Bryce Young or whoever it was, which he did amazingly well. But it'd be interesting to see how well he plays the linebacker position completely. And then you got Omar Spates and Greg Penn alongside him.
This is the next step for Harold Perkins in his development, because especially as a guy who's about 220, like he's probably going to be an inside linebacker at the next level as well. At some point, he needed to make this jump and to move fully inside to play it there. It was too much for him to handle right away as a freshman. That's a lot in terms of the calls you have to take, the double teams. You know, you got offensive guards coming right up at you, and run blocks and playing inside linebacker. And so now, you know, he's there, but because they got Omar Spates in the transfer portal, you're able to do a lot with Harold. I think people need to understand, like, it's not like he's just going to be sitting in the middle of the defense. Like, we saw him today taking edge rush reps and one-on-ones with the Jack linebackers. There were some great matchups with him and Will Campbell, you know, two of the best on the team, going at each other. They just ended up in a stalemate, basically, because they're both really good. And Harold is going to be continued using that ways, particularly on third down, but be able to move inside. And Omar is so versatile. Greg, even though, you know, he had some struggles last year, is a pretty reliable tackler and is certainly going to be a big piece of this defense. And so you feel a lot better about what you had at linebacker than you did maybe in December before LSU brought in Omar Spates. So it's going to be a really big piece of this team.
All right, down the stretch here, corner is the biggest concern, right, on the team. So Zy Alexander played at Southeastern, which has a great FCS program. Frank Silfo's done an amazing job down there in Hammond, America. They've been making the playoffs and nationally ranked and all that. But last year, it wasn't Cody Dickerson. It was Colby Richardson last year from McNeese. We laughed because Brian Kelly called him like three different things, three different names. But he was all the buzz in camp last year. He'd been starting. He bulked up a bunch. And no slam on the guy, but during the year, I don't remember him making a ton of plays. And so now Zy Alexander from Southeastern, he's on one corner. Hopefully he can hold it down. And then Deuce Chestnut, who has been injured at Syracuse and who the first day of practice we were allowed to come up, I don't want to say lost his lunch, but was getting used to the Louisiana heat. Were you saying there?
He has still been getting used to the Louisiana heat. We see him often, you know, just sort of getting a lot of fluids, trying to stay hydrated, maybe avoid what happened to him on the first day.
Don't blame him, by the way.
Yeah, that can happen to the best of them out there. It is, like we said earlier, so hot. And I mean, a lot of the guys I think who are like coming down from a transfer from the north, like he's from Syracuse. Deshaun Womack is, you know, making the move from Baltimore. And even though he went through spring ball, he was kind of injured, and so we've seen him, I think, maybe struggling a little bit right out the gates to just adjust to this kind of a weather. But yes, cornerback certainly the number one concern because there's so much unknown there. All these other positions, we've been talking about these guys who we've kind of heard about for a little while, or they were here last year, and now this is the one spot where the only person you've got back is LaTerrence Welch. And he was a special teams guy last year, and so LSU's got a long way to go in terms of figuring out that competition. Zy and Deuce have been those first teamers, like you said, but is that going to be what we see against Florida State? We'll know in a few weeks. So, I mean, they got to work through that competition. Got to see more from Denver Harris. J.K. Johnson's out right now for unclear exactly how much time he's going to miss. So there's a lot to be determined and still up in the air with that position.
Yeah, and like a guy, God bless him, like Sevin Banks last year, who did everything he could. It just never materialized.
Yeah,
so that's what you're fearful
injury
of.
is so unfortunate too that he had against Auburn.
Yeah, on the opening kickoff, very scary moment. All right, we can talk about kicking game and all that another time. Let's just end. So LSU, the coaches poll comes out. They're 5th in the country. They were unranked at this time a year ago. So was Florida State. I think LSU finished 16th in the country last year after the big blowout against Purdue. They didn't move up in the polls after they won 63-7. I always say, well, that's one good thing about a bowl game, right? You'll move up. No, you didn't at all, even in blowing this team out. But anyway, so it's a top 10 matchup to start the year, much different than a year ago. If LSU loses the game, they basically have to win out. After that, they playoff hopes and all that. So it's not, you don't want to say it's a make all, be all, but it takes a while to get a bad taste out of your mouth when you lose the first game, when you're playing Grambling the next week, who you're supposed to beat and everything. So it's very important.
It certainly is from a few different perspectives. Like you said, one, in terms of the greater college football playoff race, the winner of this game is certainly suddenly moves into being favored to make the playoff. And yet, if you lose, there is still a path for both of these teams. I mean, Florida State can go and win the ACC and get in that way. LSU can go and win the SEC, or even make the SEC championship game, win the West, and see how things shake out and potentially sneak in as the 4th seed. So it's not like all hope is lost just if you win the first game. It would be, but you want to certainly be competitive in this game. Like you said, get the season off to a greater start than you did last year, because, yeah, in terms of sort of energy and momentum, it would take some time to kind of build that up again in the fan base if they were to lose this first game just because of how the schedule shakes out. It's tough near the beginning with some of these SEC West teams, but it doesn't, you got Alabama looming off in November. And so certainly still a path if they don't win that game to get to the playoff. But if they do, then you're suddenly feeling like maybe not just like a 10-win team that's making a New Year's Six game, but all of a sudden if they do beat Florida State, then all of a sudden we're looking at this season as something that could turn into something being very special.
And it's the first game for both of them, unlike last year. Florida State got the warm-up. I don't like to make excuses, but in college football, that game 1 to game 2 jump is so significant, and typically the first game the offenses are just kind of clunky because they don't have their timing down yet. So anyway, be the first game for both in Orlando. He's Wilson Alexander from The Advocate. He's also doing videos now. I don't write as well as you do, so please
I don't do videos as well as you do.
I don't know. Look like you're catching on pretty quickly. So thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, Jacques. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we're just getting started here. It's early August. Much more to go here with LSU football before the season opener. Thanks for stopping by.